It's just that if you then want to pursue high performance, you want to pursue things that are really interesting, hard, challenging, what have you, then the price of entry is there's going to be some strong emotions show up along the way. When your client wants to have it both ways, I want to do the hard thing, but I don't want to feel the discomfort, I say, and there is the inherent trap. You can't have it both ways, and you don't need to have it both ways. Your very struggle in trying to have it both ways is what's causing you to struggle, suffer, and underperform. You want to go climb Mount Everest, the air might be thin and it might feel a bit scary at times. You want to go to the Olympics, but you don't want to be nervous and have a poor sleep the night before your final? You're freaking off your head. I play better when I'm confident. No, you play better when you're focused. Okay, well, if I can learn to focus no matter what's going on for me or what's going on around me, then hey, I can perform more consistently, and that's how we get after those sustained improvements.
One of the most world-renowned sports psychologists, been working with AFL teams, Essendon, Gold Coast Suns, with PGA, LIV, with Tennis Australia, V8 Supercars, the Olympics.
If my kids are in a house and the house is on fire, I'll still have fear of dying, I'll still have adrenaline, but I'm not really worried how I'm feeling. I'm focusing on what's more important. And I think when we lose connection to importance, all we do is focus on the discomfort. But if we stay connected to what's important, we'll endure great hardship. The neurobiology of that mechanism is super useful for clients. There's two things that I always try to help people free up to shift that relationship. One is, what are the biggest threats for an athlete leading into the Olympics? I always ask people that and say, what's the biggest threat for an athlete 3 months out from the Olympics? The answer is
Jonah Oliver, thanks for joining me here today on Expressions of Interest. As a way of intro, mate, you're probably one of the most world-renowned sports psychologists. And doing a bit of research and trying to get all the information on you, it's been really interesting to see your work. You've been working with AFL teams, Essendon, Gold Coast Suns, with the PGA, with LIV, with Tennis Australia, V8 Supercars, the Olympics, Athletics Australia, Tennis Australia, executives with BDO, Rio Tinto, EY. I'm sure the list goes on. So very excited to have you on the podcast today, mate. Chat all things sports psychology. I understand you also got a background in neuroscience as well. And what I particularly like is your ability to make psychology quite accessible and understandable. I think you've got an exceptional gift to really break down concepts and make it really engaging and understandable for the complex world of that psychology can be. So thank you for joining me here today, mate.
looking forward to the conversation, mate. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So now I'm personally interested, mate, in your world, in the work in particular with LIV Golf. Just because I'm an avid golfer myself.
Yeah.
Not a good one, but trying. And then, you've got the recent Netflix shows with Full Swing and people probably looking up, what's happening with LIV, what's happening with PGA. But I'm particularly interested from your point of view with potentially working through some of these media challenges with some of these athletes with the LIV Tour. I just wonder if you could speak to that as well around what's it been like from your point of view working with some of these players in and around this kind of crazy frenzy that's been happening with LIV Golf?
Yeah, sure. It's a big question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as an outsider, it's honestly a bit of a storm in a teacup. It's just a different product. People who are very insular to the world of golf, it feels like it's this, a massive thing. Whereas as a person who works across multiple sports, multiple sectors, we went through it in the 80s with cricket when we went from wearing all whites and test match cricket and people said no one's ever going to watch people play sport in pyjamas. And then the MCG's filled with 100,000 people watching the one-day series of Australia versus the West Indies. Then they said they're not going to watch a shortened version of that. And, of course, now 2020 is selling out. I was at the Formula One working recently in Australia, and guess what happens when the race ends? There's a rock concert on, and there's thousands of people standing there listening to music because it's about fan engagement. So really, when you look at what Live Golf is offering, it's more just bringing golf back into what mainstream sport is doing. Now, is it a complete break from the tradition of golf? Of course it is. It's a genuine disruptor. But it's become very partisan. Which side are you on? I get asked every day, what's better? I'm like, what do you mean? Steak or chicken? Like, I like both.
Yeah.
I literally have about 3 to 4 clients in each of those tours. I've got 4 or 5 guys on the European tour, 3 or 4 guys on the PGA tour, 3 or 4 guys on the Live tour. Like I work across all those sectors in golf. And so I love what they all bring. Now, to your question around what's the uniqueness, what's the challenges, I think anytime you're choosing to do something that is a break from tradition, there's some uncertainty, there's some concern around public perception, and what maybe for our Aussie golfers, what's the Australian fan base going to think? But as you'd know as a psychologist, mate, when you're doing the work, all you're doing is saying, let's do things about, do the things that matter with the people that matter in a values-based way.
Yeah.
And if you're truly doing meaningful work, then these people aren't golfers. They're humans who play golf. They're humans who go to work and play golf, and then they have a whole bunch of other domains in their life that are meaningful. And does this allow them to pivot, change, nurture other areas, or even change their relationship to golf to actually derive more satisfaction from it? So once you work through that, then all of a sudden that decision matrix becomes a bit easier. But yeah, there's always going to be pushback and judgment, and but internally, internally, for those who work in it, it's a little bit like a pinch your moment, because what people don't realize is traditional golf, unlike other sports, is exceptionally siloed and lonely.
Right.
You are running your business. If you want your team to be there, you are flying your team in. You're having to find a hotel. Everyone's having to get hire cars. Everyone's having to get in there and make it all work, right? A lot of people can't afford that. So they're just there by themselves, traveling around, might, have their caddy maybe. You miss a cut, so you got 0 paycheck, and then you sit around for the extra couple of days and maybe go hit some balls and practice, and you go to the next event. And, it's this quite a lonely, isolated sport.
Yeah.
What Liv did is they took away all the pain points.
Right. In the team aspect of the sport.
They said, what do you love about golf? Oh, we love it when once a year we play Ryder Cup or the President's. Oh, so you like playing with your teammates. Love that. Love a sense of connection and camaraderie. Oh, well, let's have a team format. What are the other pain points? Oh, well, can we just eat together? I know this sounds so obvious.
Really?
When I go to, say, a major, I get accreditation. I'm working with some of the world's best golfers, and I have to sit there with a sandwich and eat outside the players' dining because you're not allowed to even sit down with the player.
Really?
Like the caddy has to go that way, you go that way, the player, it's so antiquated in the history of, I don't know.
Yeah, who can be in the clubhouse.
Literally, right?
Yeah.
And just basic things.
Yeah.
You land at the airport and there's a car waiting for you. They pick you up. You're a professional. You're here to do a job. Now, when I land with an AFL team or go visit an NBA club, or all that stuff's just taken care of because you're part of the team. You're a staff member. You're there to do a professional job. Golf just is so outdated in the traditional mechanism. So, Liv have taken that pain point away. I mean, money helps, so they can solve a lot of those problems. But it's really the culture within it. We go out now and they compete for big money, and it's super competitive. It's not fun and giggles like everyone thinks it's sort of made out to be. Super competitive. But when you go to a major this week, right now, literally.
Yeah, I was watching this morning.
Yeah, a bunch of my guys are out there playing. The Liv guys will walk past each other and high five, say good day, go for a go for lunch together. There's a shared camaraderie that's actually galvanized them for being a little bit of the Mavericks who've chosen to go out on their own. So that's just interesting to watch. But for me, I love watching the major. I love going and working on the PGA Tour. I love golf. I love all sport. So I don't see this division as really a healthy narrative. It's more that, is it different than what's been done before? Sure. Is it groundbreakingly different than anything else that's been done in world sport? No. It's actually just mimicking and copying the good of what's done in any other industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really nice approach and appreciation to have. And I'm curious, were you working with some, I mean, you can't say specifically, but that transition with some athletes from PGA or European Tour to LIV? Because, you know, the media portrayed a certain position, I think, early on with the Saudi-backed LIV Tour. And I don't know if you can speak to that, but that would have been an interesting thing to work with the athletes. And as you said, you're working with their values and what's important for them. But did the athletes specifically feel the pressure of the media for this perceived I guess, point of view of what they thought the Saudi-backed LIV Golf Tour was?
Yeah, there's always some, people say it's easy, just focus on what matters and who matters and don't worry about the external noise. But that's a bit of that's a bit glib.
Yeah.
When you wake up and your phone is full of messages on all the social media channels with vitriol and people, calling you these horrible, horrible names and things, that takes a toll. So you've got to be pretty clear on who you are, what you stand for, and what your decision making is based upon. And I think that's why. Doing the work around your values, doing the work around what are the things that matter, and who I am as a human, and what am I actually defined by. That's where it really stands up, right? All that work's somewhat tokenistic when life's going along swimmingly. It's in the face of adversity. Do those things now come to the fore? And so that's why I love doing that work, to help people maybe make some really hard decisions in life. And that's whether it's pivoting in your sporting career direction or deciding to get a divorce. It doesn't really matter what that decision is. Is it in the service of what matters? So there was some sport done around the decision to move into that space.
Yeah. And it would have been very interesting. Everyone's got different points of view. Everyone's got different things that are important to them. The media was sort of whipped into a frenzy for, I think, a few different reasons. And then now it's supposed to be amalgamating anyway. So that would have been very interesting then from other players that maybe said no and stayed with the PGA and said no to the different offers that they were given. So there maybe then would have been some animosity there from different points of view by the decisions they chose. Yeah,
certainly. Look, it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah.
It'll be a time that people will talk about for the next sort of 50 years, right? Again, growing up, I remember vividly the whole World Series cricket and all the sort of breakaway tours and all of that, really interesting stuff to look at from a sociological perspective, not just pure sporting perspective. Yeah, this will be one of those moments where, golf was disrupted, and we'll see where it lands in the coming years.
Yeah, it will be a really interesting space. I think in the short term, you can see how many people were turning up in Adelaide for the recent LIV tournament. I think it's fantastic. You see how many younger people are playing golf around the place, and it's definitely, I think, reinvigorated a lot of viewership in different demographics. So, no, I think it's an exciting thing.
Yeah, it's good. It's all I say. It's a good product. It's a different product. I love going and watching the Ashes.
Yeah.
And I like going and watching the 2020.
Yeah.
But I'm going there for a different experience. One isn't better than the other. They're just different offerings.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. No, I appreciate that take of it. And if we could take a step back from all of this, I'm interested, I was chatting with our good friend Jason Patchell the other day, and we were talking about the role of a sports psychologist and sometimes the many different hats that we wear, especially if we're in organisations, AIS work, as well as private work. But I'm curious to get your take, your understanding of if someone hasn't really worked with a sports psychologist or doesn't have a deeper understanding of what you would do. What's your take on what you do as a sports psychologist and what roles you play with different athletes?
Yeah,
broad question.
Super broad question, and even you're somewhat going to ask me that coming in, and I'll do my best to muddle my way through it. I'd love to actually hear your answer on how you define that. Right? I'm very much a behaviourist.
Yeah,
and I think that's our role as psychologists, right? Like going right back to operant conditioning, whether that's Skinner playing around with pigeons and rats in boxes, or Pavlov and dogs and all that. Like fundamentally, I use a few cliched lines, but I help people focus on the right thing at the right time. But sometimes there's a fair bit of work to define what the right thing is.
Yeah.
And ultimately we're trying to lead to behavior change, right? So whether that's the removal of something that's getting in the way, or is it promoting, an enhanced performance, a bit of the, I'm very big on human behavior. We know is all about regression to the mean. My job is to say, can we move the mean if we're pursuing high performance in some Gaussian distribution? It's like, can we just move the mean so that with pressure, that the average likelihood of the performance has improved through doing work with me. So sometimes that's training them up in explicit techniques, or how to navigate internal discomfort or maintain focus when they're in surgery or in a war zone or on a sporting field. It doesn't really matter the context, right? Whether I'm working in a corporate setting with surgeons, with racing car drivers, with golfers, the science is the same. So for me, a lot of people are interested in why I can dance around through so many contexts. Yeah. It's like, well, when you go in for surgery, I don't think the doctor's going, now, is this person left-handed or right-handed, or are they a secretary or a CEO? They've got to repair the valve in your heart. Thankfully, our hearts look pretty similar. Well, the human brain's the human brain. And so once you apply psychological science correctly, then you can transcend any context quite rapidly and just help that individual, that organism, that institution. If you view a business as an organism and it just behaves, what are we trying to actually get rid of or enhance? Then that's the lens I bring.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that structured approach, in the sense that it really is an assessment. There's lots of people that do work in the areas that we do work. And to your question, what I think about it as well is I think there needs to be a systematic or a methodology to it, where you're looking at what outcome are we trying to get? Do I really understand where you want to get to? And let's work together as a bit of a assessment, a structure of what's getting in the way, as you said, and what are some steps to get to where we want to go. And then the accountability is on both of us to move there. And it's that real sort of structured assessment approach, I think I would say maybe separates us from maybe someone who's not a psychologist, as well as the evidence-backed information that we're supposed to be guided by the latest and greatest in research and understanding of human behaviour. But I think that's a key bit that I would say maybe people don't quite understand is there's a solid assessment and structure process to what we're trying to do. And then that allows you to put that lens in with an organisation or a golfer or a swimmer or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, just standard formulation and assessment, scientific sort of methodology holds up. But I think the analogy I use, and where I think there is sometimes confusion in the system, I go to a life coach, I've got a breath coach, I go to a performance enhancement specialist. Like, there's terminologies floating around everywhere, okay? I think the challenge is, on the surface, some of the interventions these people who are untrained, unqualified, and that they're delivering actually look and feel not that different than some of the things I'm delivering. If I go to a really skilled sports physiotherapist who's got 20 years of expertise, sometimes she may just massage my hip flexor and flush out my calves, and it feels really good, and I walk away and I feel like, oh, that was great. But my massage therapist down the road, who may not have actually even done any courses in that, can do that same intervention. But I know that my physiotherapist is looking for injury, risk profile, can pick up if there's something else going on, might actually think a bit about designing a strength program to make sure I'm stronger through those, whatever. They've got a whole body of science to help me not keep reoccurring with, my injury or soreness or stiffness or whatever that's going on. And I'm laboring the analogy. But sometimes you might come to me and you just get some advice around A, B, or C that feels like, okay, that was useful, but it also wasn't that, or, oh, I did some breath work and some grounding and some mindfulness and some, that's because that's what was required and that's all that was required. But there's a mountain of work that goes on behind it in terms of scientific evaluation, formulation, diagnostics, and having the right tools to use to help that person. So I think that's where the marketplace at the moment is, in the internet and everything, is saturated with, ideas, opinions, and surface level interventions. The benefit of going and seeing a registered psychologist is, you've got a safer pair of hands given the training that sits behind it.
Absolutely. I think that's a very fantastic way to articulate that, and I think many people can appreciate the depth that goes in behind it. Do you feel that also it's related to the work that might be provided from one of these external providers might be easier or more enjoyable and gets the initial outcome you want? Like, I want to feel good when I'm performing. This person makes me feel good just before I go and perform. Therefore, it calm me down. They make me feel positive and happy. That's what I want to feel out there. Do you feel like that perpetuates this sort of desire to attach to those sort of things?
Undoubtedly. I think that extends even to the field of psychology.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there putting asbestos in roofs. Hey, asbestos keeps your house cool. Yep. Kills you. Gives you cancer.
Yeah.
But, if I just want to cool a house, then the person putting asbestos sheets in my roof solves my pain point. What I don't understand is, that it's actually in the long term causing more harm. And that's where the work that I'll lean into is, a cigarette, cigarette gives you short-term relief, kills you. Like, let's not do interventions that might give you short-term relief. I'm stressed. I went and did something. It took my stress away. Whatever that short-term gain is, I'm very much centered in what is the long-term change we're pursuing, and are you willing to embrace and make room for the pain that inevitably will show up in the pursuit of that? Because if there wasn't pain and discomfort, you would have solved it yourself. The very fact they're sitting in my room tells me they know what they want to change. They know, they generally know what they're doing wrong. They generally know what they want to do more of. They just find it really hard when the discomfort shows up.
Yep.
And so let's talk a bit about what's getting in the way and how can we actually be more willing for that discomfort.
Yeah, because I feel there's almost this bias where they go, I've performed really well when I've been calm and when I've been confident.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, that's the thing that I need to try and do more of.
Sure.
And it makes sense on a surface level. But I think there's also that like correlation versus causation type thing and going, was it just correlational that it happened there, and what's the likelihood that you can control that and do that again? And also it's like, I think of that analogy with, grandma was smoking till she was 100 and, they go, well, smoking's fine then because she lived to 100. She goes, well, how old would she have lived if she didn't smoke? Would she live more than that and what the quality of life is? And so just because it worked for that short amount of time doesn't mean that that's the reason that it did. Do you find that in particular is a common thing or a thing that you see a fair bit where they go, well, I need to feel this certain way because it had a good result this one time?
Yeah, it's just attributional error, right? It's at the heart of the human condition. we have evolved to respond to emotion. So they're not making an error. They're responding to their neural architecture. See a snake. Our brain doesn't see the snake and go, dangerous animal. Our brain goes, I need to make you feel something to move away from that threat. I know, I'll give you this emotional experience called anxiety that's really unpleasant. Our brain floods our system with it, and we're like, oh, I've got to get rid of that feeling, and we move further away from the snake, and our brain says, now I'll quickly suck that back up and give you some, and your brain goes, okay, that's a better state. So we get addicted to this idea of when I feel discomfort, I must do something to get rid of it. When I feel anger, I must get something to do rid of it. When I'm hungry, I've got to go find food. Like we are just evolved to respond to emotion. We're emotion-governed organisms. That's fine. It's just that if you then want to pursue high performance, you want to pursue things that are really interesting, hard, challenging, what have you, then the price of entry is there's going to be some strong emotions show up along the way. When your client wants to have it both ways, I want to do the hard thing, but I don't want to feel the discomfort, I say, and there is the inherent trap. You can't have it both ways, and you don't need to have it both ways. Your very struggle in trying to have it both ways is what's causing you to struggle, suffer, and underperform. You want to go climb Mount Everest, the air might be thin and it might feel a bit scary at times. You want to go to the Olympics, but you don't want to be nervous and have a poor sleep the night before your final? You're freaking off your head.
Yeah.
Like, stop trying to have, both, versus if I can start to change the fundamental relationship I have to internal discomfort, all of my athletes are totally willing to push their physiology to places of extreme discomfort. Oh yeah, Jonah, I'll break my bone in a tackle on the rugby field, no problem. I'll feel lactic acid till I'm vomiting with repeat sprints. I will run till my max VO2 makes me pass out on the ergo. They do that all the time. Okay, and would you be willing to feel some anxiety that's really strong and feels a bit unpleasant internally and gives you some stories of doubt and worry, and you're like, oh no, I want you to help take that away. Well, you've hired the wrong guy.
Yep.
How about we just get better at making room for that and seeing that as the price of entry, and actually when it shows up, if I actually am willing to embrace that and see that as normal, then it doesn't distract me when it's there. So why do people crave confidence and calmness and trust and certainty? Not actually because it feels good. It's because it's much easier to then focus on the task at hand.
Right. That's an interesting point.
Right.
Yeah.
I performed well. Jonah, I've got data. I can show you. When I'm confident, I play well. I say, oh, you don't need to show me the data. I get it. But it's the causal mechanism is I can focus more easily on the task at hand. And I'll never debate that. If I wake up clear, calm, confident in the morning of my Olympics, it will be easier for me to simply focus on my race plan and execute. If I wake up scared, apprehensive, a bit nervous, I'm going to have to do something intentional to shift my focus from those threat indicators and bring it to the behaviors I want to do. Fine. So that's why my brain might then, oh, I wish I was more calm. I wish I was more calm. Yeah, it's easier. And the human brain craves ease and comfort. So it's more about the energy that might, be required to focus when there's some sort of, pressure around. So to me, you nailed it when you sort of talk about causal versus correlational mechanisms. Yeah, it's just an attributional error of causality that isn't actually true. It's I play better when I'm confident. No, you play better when you're focused. Okay, well, if I can learn to focus no matter what's going on for me or what's going on around me, then, hey, I can perform more consistently, and that's how we get after those sustained improvements.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that absolutely nails it, because so many athletes, high performers, are going, I just want to be able to focus on what I'm doing. And I love that it's not so much about feeling confident and calm. It's that it's really easy to focus on the right thing at the right time when I'm confident and calm. But there's almost like there's not this appreciation that, when you spoke about that physically they're able to move into that difficulty, it's like, yeah, that's not a problem. I'll take the tackle, I'll work hard in the gym, and I'll push my body physically. How come, and what do you think influences the lack of wanting to do that psychologically? Because the analogy there is beautiful. Well, you work so hard in the gym, and you take so much physical strain, and you're not trying to get rid of it. You seem to be able to make room for the physical duress that is inherent within your sporting context. Why do we then have such difficult time doing that psychologically?
Yeah, well, again, I think it comes down to cognitive load and attention. So if you go back to when you're young and you first do your sprint and the legs fill up with lactic acid, it does completely hijack your focus. You do look to the sideline and think something's wrong. Mum, Dad, something's going wrong with my legs. Oh, I can't walk. They're jelly. And you do slow down, right? And most athletes still slow down when they're getting that lactic acid because the pain signal says slow down. It's only the very, very elite who go, this is agony, but I'm willing to make room for it. But still, even some of the world's best, when that pain shows up, they just drop that little bit. So do know that it always is about trying to remove and reduce pain. It's just that I think there's an acceptance, a far greater acceptance, that physical pain is normal. It passes. You don't die from it. You can still maintain focus on the actual task at hand. And culturally, you got to do it. You're meant to do it. You actually celebrated for doing it, right? He played through the footy grand final with a broken cheekbone, and there's accolades for it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's the early exposure to it, the normality of it, the understanding that I can still perform with it. Plus, there's the societal reinforcers that encourage that behavior of making room for the physical. Whereas in the psychological, it's harder to see, it's harder to measure, it's internal, and it gets in the way, it can get in the way of our focus. So therefore, I underperformed, not because I was feeling some physical pain, because I was nervous. And that's the attribution error. No, you got distracted by your nerves. So because it's so strong and primal and quite ever-present in terms of its ability, I always say the number one thing that distracts athletes is themselves.
Yep.
It's not the 100,000 at the MCG. It's not the opponent. It's actually their own internal experience. And so that's why we're so resistant. I'm trying to think about how we can extend the analogy. It's a bit like saying, Jonah, I can run really well when there's not lactic acid in my legs. The first 120 meters of the 400-meter race, I've got really good technique and form. So I just want to, can I not have lactic for the last, Yeah. Well, in psychology, I think people gravitate to that idea that, if only I could be free from any, internal experience that's hard and tough, I'll perform better. So there's a greater resistance to just sort of sitting with it.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? It's going, when I spill milk at home, I clean it up because I don't want it there. Why can't I do that internally in my internal world? It'd be much easier.
Yeah.
And I think that's also that greater understanding that neural architecture is there for a reason, and actually resists you getting in there and trying to get rid of it. It's going, no, this is important. We've got to upregulate. There's this evolutionary purpose behind what we're doing. And so there's this fight against that too.
Yeah, and that's where some basic understanding of the neurobiology of that mechanism is super useful for clients. There's two things that I always try to help people free up to shift that relationship. One is understanding the positive function of fear, and then secondly, connecting to things of importance. I'll walk through those two. If I said to an athlete, listen, I've got this wonder drug here. It's completely allowed, IOC and WADA, everybody approves it, it's all fine, and it's going to give you greater reaction time. It's going to give you greater muscle force contraction, so you can do a maximum, force production. Greater visual acuity, so you can pick up on cues and see things sharper. Better auditory acuity, so you can hear the starting gun or hear your teammate calling out. Or every sense is actually elevated and at its peak performance. and you'll buffer pain more and be able to run for longer. It gives you all these wonderful things. There's a couple of side effects. You might have to go to the toilet a couple of times before the event, because it just gets, you get a little bit of the, a little bit of the nervous sort of, got to piss or go to the toilet a bit. You might have a bit of that nauseous feeling in your stomach a bit. And you know what? It might make your brain a bit buzzy, a bit like when you have too much coffee. You might just get a little bit, active in some of your thoughts and memories and, what have you. But do you still want that drug?
Yeah.
Give it to me in full dose.
Yeah.
So, let's not fool ourselves. I want every one of my athletes at the Olympics coming up in Paris to be actually pulsating with adrenaline and anxiety and just harnessing the benefits of it. What helps that? Firstly, understanding that there's some big positive gains from it. And then the second one is, how about we focus less on how hard and unpleasant and, that this internal experience is, and focus on what's actually at stake. Like, if my kids are in a house and the house is on fire, I'll still have fear of dying. I'll still have adrenaline, but I'm not really worried how I'm feeling. I'm focusing on what's more important. And I think when we lose connection to importance, all we do is focus on the discomfort. Right? But if we stay connected to what's important, we'll endure great hardship.
Yeah.
And for me, too much of psychology is focused on the discomfort. Every single footy club, self-monitoring, how are you feeling? How'd you sleep? How's your mood? How's your anxiety? What's your Whoop data saying? It's all well-intentioned. It's designed to pick up on flags and prevent injury and try to, it's all well-intentioned, but it's just dialing up the spotlight on the person's emotional experience versus how ready are you to perform? How ready are you to train today? Are you connected to what you want to achieve today in terms of what matters? My granddad went into, Papua New Guinea and Egypt, and I don't think he was checking his whoop to see whether he was ready to shoot the Japanese, right? And I don't think he came back and complained that much, even though he had malaria and nearly died and was, because he was, in his mind, he was saving Australia. I can't even imagine what it was like to sleep at night in a New Guinea jungle and have the thought of being killed and all of that. But when those men connect and women connected to something of such great importance, then their own psychological discomfort and physical discomfort was so secondary to the task at hand.
Yeah.
And I think psychology needs to remind ourselves our job is to help our clients behave in accordance with what they want to get after. Well, you can't tell me you want to be a top 10 golfer in the world or go win a gold medal or do something and then not have any discomfort in the pursuit of that.
Yeah, there's a price.
There's a price.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. And that's the work that needs to be done of what's important to you specifically. What do you actually value and why? And once you get that alignment, then we can start moving in that valued direction.
Correct.
Yeah. No, I think that's an amazing message to move through and get across. And it kind of leads us to understanding, the Olympics are coming up, and no doubtedly you're working with a number of Olympians in the pursuit of Paris. What are some of these common myths and well-intentioned ideas that you're seeing that's coming up over the next few months?
Yeah, well, it's not too dissimilar. I think as we get closer and closer, the anticipatory anxiety goes up. That's very normal. And then we get into control strategies. We're trying to minimize any threats. So all of a sudden, what are the biggest threats for an athlete leading into the Olympics? I always ask people that and say, what's the biggest threat for an athlete 3 months out from the Olympics? Generally, the answer is their body.
Yeah. Injuries.
Yeah. Their own body, themselves. They become hypervigilant.
Yeah.
to anything that could be a potential threat. The feeling a little bit unwell, the slightly stiff lower back, the low energy, the something, right? So what you find is they sometimes avoid doing the work that's required because they're trying to protect and minimize the risk of, let's say, if it's a physiological sport, injuring themselves. But it doesn't even matter if it's a really fine motor control technical sport. It's still that same pattern. So the well-intentioned mistake is they're trying to protect themselves from any adversity, but in doing so, chasing mediocrity.
Right. And this is both physically, skill development, and psychologically?
Yeah, exactly. All of the above, right?
Yeah.
All of the above. I mean, I don't know the actual statistic on it, but I know it's somewhere very high. Might even be around the 80% mark. 80% of athletes who go to the Olympics don't perform at a season's best or personal best level.
Really?
Now, if you actually think about what the Olympics are, look, there's only a tiny amount of people who actually medal, but every athlete, you would hope, with the whole team around them of sports scientists and coaches and physiologists and psychologists, you'd hope that the idea is to get that organism into a place where they're most likely to perform at least at their season's best given the year they might have had, right? PB is separate, but they might have had injury, they might have a setback, but you'd hope that they're tapered into a season's best-ish zone, and yet the majority don't. The majority, not the minority, the majority don't.
Yeah, 80%.
So,
Huge.
Why is that? Generally, I find a whole bunch get lost in the occasion. So it's the Olympics. I need to do an Olympic performance. So what do we know about the human brain? The bigger the occasion, the bigger the emotional response we think we need to bring. So a lot of people put on their Superman or Superwoman cape and they try to, lift to match the bigness of the event. And in doing so, completely deviate from all of the last 15 years of training, right? They go out too fast in the race and blow up. They try to throw the javelin too hard and completely break down their biomechanical model, and this thing falls out of the sky. The relay runners drop the baton because you just see it. It's actually really hard to watch as a psychologist, seeing all these underperformances in this moment that really matters. But it's because they mix up that they need to go out there and lift. I call it the tyranny of the lift. You are literally saying after 12 years of training in a really pretty simple, like motor patterns in Olympics, they're often pretty simple sort of tasks. I'm going to say to myself, I need to go out there and lift. You're saying to yourself, I need to go out and do something I've not done before. So on the biggest day of my life in this sporting domain, I'm going to go out there and do something I've never actually done before and trained for. Like, it's lunacy.
Yeah.
I don't want my surgeon doing that.
No.
Right?
No.
So, and the military get that right. They don't do that.
No.
It's about an ordinary performance on a special day. It's about replication. The second thing athletes do is they misinterpret the increased emotional load of the context. It's big, it's real, it's the Olympics, it matters. There's, it's huge for these people. But they misinterpret that the task complexity changes. The emotions are definitely more complex and louder, but the task complexity hasn't changed.
Yes.
But their brain thinks it has.
I need to lift and I need to do more amazing things and I need to get better numbers and...
Well, no, it's more that it's harder.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
It's back to you love golf. It's like that first tee shot at the Masters. Wind off the left, trees there, lots of extra looks and waggles, and it's like, why is that athlete getting bogged down over the ball? Like, it's just a driver. The task complexity is no different than a Tuesday golf or driving range golf or what you've been doing since you're 12.
Yep.
You pick a target, you have a start line, you think about the shape and flight you want to hit, and you take the club away and, don't shorten up and get steep, don't get too long, just normal swing and hit the thing. It's just hitting a driver. Now, it feels immensely harder because it's hitting a tee shot at the Masters. But the task complexity has not changed at all. And that's what we've got to make sure we help our athletes connect to. But yeah, the errors Olympians make is they think that what they have to do at Paris is bigger, more, or more complex than what it really is. It's about going out there and being actually quite boring and just replicating, the behavioral output whilst in a very, unique, novel environment.
Yeah, because that's the thing, that they have this perception that they want to lift and they want to have even greater performance, maybe even go beyond some of the times and numbers that they've hit before. And so they're trying to do everything greater and better, not acknowledging how and why they got there in the first place. But on top of that, there's all the upregulation of the emotional stuff going on as well. It's a very hard combination to do. No wonder we're seeing such high prevalence of underperformance.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you still see it and hear it so much in media as well, is, they got to lift and, they got to do better and we got to, do this for this reason and blah, blah, blah. And it's almost like that contextual pressure adds on to the internal pressure as well.
Yeah.
And the athlete's just going,
yeah,
how do I navigate all this?
Yeah, and we know that if you just pursue repetition, replication of the norm, then sometimes the magical je ne sais quoi of the occasion, the adrenaline, the what have you, might bring out a performance that does exceed, your mean. I love when I see that happening, but the easiest way to do that is to not go chasing it.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, they're going, what they might say to me is, but Tom, I can't make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Like the stakes are so high, surfing, the decision making is so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, yes, but there's a consequence of thinking that you can make a wrong decision as well. There's a consequence of putting that sort of internal pressure on you to get everything perfect and to get everything right and to be amazing in this moment when it's a special day, as you say.
I like to separate errors and mistakes and play around with language. If you don't want to make an error, just, I don't know, in surfing, I guess just drop in and do a really safe turn and just score a 4 out of 10 or whatever it is. You can take error off the table really easily. And you've just done one giant mistake.
Yeah.
You've absolutely found, you have passionately found mediocrity. Right? So I say, well, hang on. You may be disappointed if you make an unforced error. You go out there and you make an error. But were you surfing in the right way, pursuing the right thing, sticking to the best way you could, navigate that wave, and, really bringing your talent to the fore in the pursuit of what you said is actually important? Well, then, okay, disappointment if it doesn't come off, but you don't have regret. I say you better understand the difference between disappointment and regret.
Yeah.
Disappointment is I didn't get the chocolates today because I made an error, and that sucks. It hurts. It really does hurt, but it's only disappointment. Regret is lifelong, because you sit there when you put your head on the pillow at night and go, I know I never even put myself in a position to potentially even show my best, win the Park Masters or the Olympic gold or whatever it is, because I self-sabotaged. That's the mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel that that's one of the more common things that you see, like this perfectionism that we see with athletes, that they not allowing themselves even the possibility to make mistakes?
Yeah, it's just whether it's adaptive or maladaptive perfectionism.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got a single client who's not perfectionistic, because that's what's led to those obsessional training habits and the willingness to do the hard.
Yeah,
it's just that it can be a bit like a masquerade ball, right? What's actually behind the mask, If it's maladaptive perfectionism, then it's more about trying to avoid the adverse consequence. I'm training so hard so Dad doesn't disapprove of me. I'm coming to training early so I don't embarrass myself. It's all about the fear of the unwanted, versus adaptive perfectionism is much more aligned to seeing things as challenge. The work that Dweck and others, and growth mindset and all that stuff's really appropriately, the science behind that does link into how do I attribute whatever's hard as challenge and as not something permanent about me, but more situationally about what's going on for me. So yeah, it's not about perfection per se. It's about, is it adaptive or maladaptive?
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's a very adaptive, beneficial role that perfectionism or the pursuit of greatness has done to get you here.
Correct.
It's literally gotten you here to do the abnormal thing. Like, let's be honest,
Yep.
Greatness is abnormal by definition. You're trying to be better than everyone else. You're trying to be the best in the world. That requires you to do some abnormal behaviors.
Yep.
The amount of work and how many balls you want to hit in tennis and how much time you spend on court, it's abnormal.
Yep.
And this supreme drive to improve and to grow your competence, that's a very useful and desirable thing. But then what's the update on it?
Yeah, I mean, both are motivational, right?
Yeah.
Fear motivates. So, you always just want to examine what is your driving force? Am I doing this to move towards, challenge, improvement, mastery, seeing how good I can be, and, or is it, the removal of the unpleasant, because as parents, when you see your kid getting up in the morning and going and, doing their schoolwork or training in the morning and doing it, and you think it looks like they're driven, they're passionate and they're motivated, you want to make sure you're really interrogating what's actually going on, because perseverance in the absence of passion is just grind. That's all it is. But as a parent, we might like the look of it. We think it's hard work and determined and passionate, and they got a great. It's like, are they just doing that because they're wanting your little nod of approval? Then that's extrinsic, that's circumstantial, and it's just, on the surface it's perseverance, but there's no true connection to something more meaningful.
Yeah, and do you see that in team sports as well? The younger athlete wants the approval of the coach, or maybe the leadership group, and they're trying to do all these things in pursuit of acceptance, belonging to the group.
Oh, all humans do.
Yeah,
doesn't matter what the setting. Corporate sectors, sporting. It's probably more the inverse though. As I said, I don't want to make an error and have the negative view of the group.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss that kick and therefore be judged consequently. I don't want them to think that I'm not talented. I don't want them to think that I don't work hard. I don't want them to think that I don't have the ability. It's always about the fear of the negative, not actually the pursuit of the positive. That's the difference between the adaptive and maladaptive. It's, the adaptive is, hey, I'm a young kid. It's my first year. I'm going to make some stuff ups. Matter of fact, they probably expect me to. But you know what? I'm going to show them that I can move the ball through the midfield. I can take it on. And I'm going to, that's that more that growth mindset and taking stuff on and being willing to feel the short-term discomfort of an error in the pursuit of growth. Whereas the impression management and worrying about what others think, and therefore just trying to not give any evidence to confirm that I might be defective, a failure, or what have you, is what then just extinguishes people who might have a relatively good physical potential, but they'll just never realise it if they're fused with that story.
Absolutely. And then it comes back to the original point of, how does that influence focus then?
Yeah.
If your whole pursuit is to avoid the negative consequences of your performance, how does that affect in the moment your ability to focus on the right thing at the right time?
Yep.
Massively.
Correct.
So what are some of these large myths that you still see in the performance realms that you see perpetuated in society and in the media, or common things that, say, new clients might present with?
Yeah, well, it's still the fundamentals that we've initially touched on. It's the belief that any underperformance is caused by this psychological state I was in. So, I was too nervous, I was too worried, I didn't have enough of confidence or trust or belief or certainty or whatever words they want to attribute to it. So they, that classic misattribution of causality, and therefore, every client will come through the door wanting something changed or fixed, typically in that. I guess my job is to highlight where they're going wrong in that and then help them see the pitfalls in that. So for me, interventions that are very short term that target some change to internal experience, changing your arousal levels, your self-belief, your self-talk, all that stuff is not only a short-term band-aid, but actually causes harm.
Yep.
So it's not even impotent. It actually causes harm.
Yeah, I think that's a massive one. It's not the fact that it's not useful or if it doesn't have the performance outcome. It's actually detrimental to your performance to be dependent on a certain psychological state for performance.
Yeah, correct. If I have to control my emotions before I can play well, then I'm going to be a very inconsistent athlete, because there might be some days where I was in a certain state that I thought was useful. But moreover, what we know is, particularly in sports where you're going through, you're climbing the ladder. So you're going from playing, in-season football to finals football into a grand final. You're going from competing at national titles into world titles into the Olympics. So, any of that stuff where occasions feel emotionally bigger, then what often happens is you might have developed certain coping strategies that do control your emotional state and got you through those levels, but then you enter into the step up and inevitably those techniques fail, and then you're really vulnerable. Because not only are those techniques not working, but you're now panicking that those techniques aren't working, and that's what hijacks your focus completely.
Yeah.
And when people talk about choking in sport, it is not from being over-aroused and too just worried, and it is you are completely lost in your wrestling with, oh shit, I'm not liking how this is going, I don't like how I'm feeling, I'm trying to control how I'm feeling, I'm failing at controlling, and then you got that metacognitive worry is what we call it, but you got the worry of the worry, or the worry of your inability to control your internal state, and all of that is just like a fish on a line. You're completely hooked by your own internal emotional state, and something so simple like hitting a 5-foot putt with 1 inch outside the right edge at the right speed, and you see people leaving it a foot short, and you're just like, how could that skill break down? It's so simple and so repetitive, and they've done it hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times, but they completely aren't even connecting to the speed of the putt because they're just so internal.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. People that might not have heard the word metacognitive worry, there's normal worry, which you've been talking about. There's normal, hey, there's some information, there's some noise my brain is telling me because this is an important thing, it means something to me. But it's the worry of worry that becomes the thing that hijacks and that really takes away from the sense of control, takes away from the focus on the right thing to do. Yeah. It's that worry that really starts snowballing.
It's everything. The judgment of it.
Yeah.
It's the judgment of it. Am I judging my pre-game anxiety as a problem? Am I judging it that when I feel this way, I'm not going to play well? I need to now do something about that. I need to get rid of it, suppress it, distract myself, block it out, something. If I've judged it as a bad thing I don't want to have in my brain, in my body. Yeah. Whereas if I change my relationship to it, then that frees me up from that metacognitive worry about it. So I'm just nervous and that's okay, versus, oh shit, I'm nervous, I've got to get rid of this. Well, if I'm in the room at the MCG and the coach is putting up critical instructions on the whiteboard, and you see a bunch of zombies sitting in the players' eyes because they're not even really taking in any of the content, because they are literally in their head trying to control their nerves because the game's all tied up. It's the grand final and it's 1 quarter to go or whatever. Then they're lost. Then there's no ability to free up your frontal cortex, and that's where performance just goes out the window.
And what would you say are some of the big challenges for athletes in going, okay, I understand, Jonah, that I need to start making more room for these very normal experiences that are coming in, but it's difficult. I feel hijacked. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it. What pushback or challenges do you hear them say? And then what sort of advice and information do you give in the pursuit of, okay, now we actually need to make room for this?
Yeah, well, you want to start with workability firstly.
Yeah.
If you've got the solution, mate, then keep doing what you're doing. But do we agree that every attempt you've tried, and they would have tried a lot, lucky socks, lucky jocks, putting a stopwatch on when they eat their pasta and their blue Powerade, deep breathing, cue words, relaxation, mantras, writing words on their wrist, writing journals, the list is long, and you would have seen it. Again, well-intentioned.
Yep.
And I just simply interrogate that. Let's just look at what you've been doing and what has actually helped. And normally there's a reason they're sitting in my room, because they've gone full circle and realised none of it. Some of it might have, for one game that really helped, just kept saying that word in my head over and over and over. But then it didn't work. And it's So you start with workability. Has anything you've been doing to date working? If not, would you be open and willing to pursue something different? And then to the end, is there something meaningful that we're actually pursuing? You've got to understand that. I can do every intervention that I'm trained in, but if there's no connection to it being important, then short-term discomfort will always win.
Yep.
Is there a smoker on planet Earth that doesn't know it's bad for them? I can't just say, hey, listen, it's bad for you. Wonderful. I'll just pay your invoice and thank you very much. I'm never going to smoke again. It's not about understanding how, the impact of that behavior. It's why do you want to quit smoking? If there's nothing there of meaning, even with all my years in psychology training, that person's going to keep on smoking. That person's going to still yell at their colleagues. That person's still going to leave their putts short. That person's still going to take the drugs. That person's still, we know that about human behavior. That person's still going to eat too much simple carbohydrates and be overweight. You can't change any human behavior through just education of that it's bad for us.
Yeah, telling them that it's wrong. We see that with food all the time.
Correct.
It's like, no, don't eat this. That's not good for you. And they go, but it makes me feel a certain way. There's an emotional connection to it. My mum made it like that.
Yeah. Well, and you've also got neural architecture that says eat the simple carbohydrate.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with you. You're not defective and broken. You're doing what your brain has evolved to do. But if you want to live a different life and change what's going on, then we've got to be willing to feel some pretty strong discomfort.
Yep.
Now, if I'm going to ask you to do something that's unpleasant and have some urges and things you're going to have to ride the wave of, well, there better be something that it's in the service of that's really important. If my kids are on one side of a rickety bridge like Indiana Jones and it's got rotten wood planks and ropes that might break, I'm still running across that bridge if I think they're in danger. I'll face and make room for the discomfort of me maybe dying. But I don't care about how scary that is and also how hard that might be and also the potential risk of death because my kids are so damn important to me.
Yep.
So human behavior change can be rapid and immediate and trial one learning. I still can't remember the circumference of a circle even though I did that formula 1,000 times in high school. You step in front of a bus once and jump back out of the way and survive. I don't need to step in front of another bus to learn that buses are dangerous. Trial one learning. Well, I really push the needle in my therapy about saying, how can I say this to my clients only once or something so it really lands and we make behavior change? None of this bullshit, behavior takes time. That's a cop-out.
Yeah.
And psychologists, it's a cop-out. You can change behavior quickly and immediately if there's something of importance at stake. And maybe that's my style, but that's probably that's the approach I find my clients respond to is let's not spend 6 months in therapy enacting marginal changes and failings and stepping back. It's like, no. You don't tell me it's important, then lie to me or lie to yourself. If you truly say it's important, let's make sure, firstly, that is true. I want to be world class. Do you really? Or do you just want the participation badge in the uniform? But let's find out. Because there's some people, and that's okay. Like, I love that. You know what, Jonah? I do just want to go to the Olympics and tick that box and feel a sense of satisfaction that I made it that far. And awesome. At least that's authentic.
Yeah.
And own it. And I'll champion that and celebrate and help you get to that stage of your career. But don't tell me you want to be, world number one or world class or, see how good you can be and then not say, you're not willing to feel something hard in the pursuit of that.
Yeah, and because then that's what ends up happening is someone goes, well, maybe I just care less.
Yep.
So if I just care less, then maybe I'll get out of my own way and be able to achieve the thing. And it's like, well, this is actually the opposite of what you're talking about and advocating for. Caring less is not actually what's important. How can you care less about something that's the most important thing to you?
It's just a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a safety behavior.
Yeah.
It's just saying, if I tell myself I care less, then I'll worry less and then maybe I'll play really well. Oh, so you do care about it. So it's just a lie.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. And I would imagine that you have no problem exposing that.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, call that bullshit out really quick.
Yeah.
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 And it just feels, so you want me to really connect to how important it is? Yeah, I do. But that could make me feel more nervous. It might.
Yeah, and it might mean that you might have to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
It might mean that you have to appreciate the fact that this is everything that you've tried and strived for in your life and it's on the line right now.
Yeah.
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 Because how important is it to you?
Yeah. If I said to one of your surfers, hey, listen, tell me something you really love. Oh, I love my dog, Jack. Okay, cool. Hey, tell you what, how about you go out there and what I want to see is you fully commit to like a full wave, like don't over surf, but like when you go up for that cutback, that flow, that Rio, I want you to absolutely find your talent, level and really express yourself on that wave. Oh, otherwise I'm going to shoot Jack dead, And by the way, I don't care if you fall off the wave. I don't care if you make an error. I don't care if it doesn't come off, but we need to see you absolutely fully, attacking that wave in the right way, or I'm shooting your dog dead, Oh, okay. Well, I'll do it then, Jonah. Right. So what does that show? It's actually not about willingness to surf the right way. It's about connecting to, it's not my dog's more important than whether I fall off the wave. My dog's more important of whether I score well in this moment or not. Okay, well, I know it's a playful metaphor, but it's like, we can actually do the behavior if we connect to something of importance.
Yeah, and connect that over the reduction or the negative perceived consequence of what people will think of me, or I'm not good enough or talented, or that seems to be a lot of the time the motivator in the time. But but actually, what's the important pursuit of greatness that you're trying to do at the end of the day? Yeah. That should be the focus rather than the negative consequence of what could go wrong.
Well, yeah, but you also realise that it doesn't matter if it's connecting to something really deep and ethereal, like the best version of me and my values and my self-expression and feeling really satisfied with the version of me that showed up. Like, that's all really cool, rich, meaningful stuff that I like doing, as I know you do. But it can also be, I just want to win the Pipe Masters, or I just want to get the outcome. I want to win whatever. It's like, okay, so for you to just be totally connected to an outcome, like I want to win that thing, or I want to really be connected to the deep values I possess and the best version of me, are the behaviors any different? Like, in terms of, you're going to have to surf really well to actually win that, right? You're going to have to play really good golf to win the major. Like, you can't go out there and just keep it in the fairway and not swing fully at it and just, you can do that and you'll finish 40th, or, we know that, right? So I like just playing around with that idea that we're actually pursuing consistency of the behavior, and it's going to require a connection and a commitment to the stability of those systems and processes. And would I like you to connect to something more meaningful or long-term? And yeah, we know that actually holds up more over time, but it's okay if your clients are just connecting to something more outcome and short-term and tangible. I'll still use that as a hook to make sure that the behavior that's going to show up in that moment is stable.
Yep. And it's the stability of the behavior over time like what you said at the start, that it's kind of this regression to the mean sort of thing. It's like, yeah, it doesn't mean that every single time you're going to get it right.
Yeah.
It's like, don't put that judgment and pressure on yourself either, just because you've been doing the psychological work, that now that you should have this excellent level every single time. No, you're human. You make mistakes. Stuff happens. Contextual things happen. Internal things happen. And that's fine. And now we're going back to where we were previously, where the judgment and the lack of control of things is now what's sort of hijacking and hooking you.
Yeah. And I think once you do that work, I think it's about taking away actually some of that inherent uncertainty. And what I mean by that is when a client says something like, yeah, okay, Jonah, done all that work, Whew, you know, I guess we'll see how I perform tomorrow. I say, what are you talking about? How do you not know how you're going to perform tomorrow? You should know exactly how you're going to perform tomorrow. I'll call out that bullshit immediately. We don't know where you're going to finish in the race. We don't know whether you're going to win the tournament. We don't know whether you're going to make the final of Pipe Masters. Like, for freaking hell, sport's hard and complex and there's opposition but to tell me you don't know how you're going to perform, that's bullshit. You're going to go out there and ride timidly and tentatively and reactively and avoid doing what matters, or are we going to step into the discomfort and connect to what matters and replicate the behavior you've been doing? And, you know, so all of a sudden you see the clients start to go, oh, you're right. I know exactly how I'm going to play on the Sunday of the Masters. Yep. Exactly how I'm going to play. I don't know whether the ball's going to go in the hole in less strokes than what I want. The scorecard will be the scorecard. But I know how I'm going to play. I know what I'm going to do on those tee shots. I know how I'm going to commit to the normal swing. I know how, when I'm on the green, how I'm going to really connect to the speed of the putt and make sure I hit it with intention and connect, you know, line up my line and speed. And I'm not going to sabotage and steer it and be tentative and, you know, avoid. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I know exactly the brand of golf I'm playing.
Yeah, and the brand of golf you're playing, the performance is different to the outcome.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, and I think that gets misconstrued, is that I want to control the outcome, because I've heard you say it before, you know, one of the most undesirable emotions is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I want to reduce that at all costs.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I say, well, we can actually increase your sense of certainty.
Yeah, I like it.
The outcome's the outcome. But what's in your control? What I show up and how I choose to perform? Absolutely. So take that ownership back, you know?
Yeah, reclaim that ownership, reclaim a sense of certainty over what you actually have influence over.
Yeah, agency.
Yeah.
We know that in developmental years, that's what all that stuff shows, that it's not about being exposed to adversity. Matter of fact, we know it's a necessity. If you want to have high-achieving children who thrive in life, they must be exposed to adversity and setback and challenge and hardship and failure and rejection and all those things. It's their ability to develop a sense of control, of agency. I can do something about this. I'm getting bullied. I can walk away. I can report to the teacher. I can say no. I can tell my parents. I can do something.
So because I know you're working in this realm a lot at the moment, so you feel that sense of agency mediates whether the child or the youth feels a sense of control over the situation.
Correct. Well, we actually know it.
Yeah.
We know there's neurobiological markers that are upstream from the fear centers.
Right.
You know, I don't want to get too much into some of the psychological science because it might not fit the listeners here, but all the stuff that you would have learned at university around learned hopelessness and help is wrong. That study of the cat on the cone that falls in the water, it's actually not how our brain functions. It's actually wrong. We're actually born in a hopeless state, and it's that we will always revert to that way of operating unless we've got a different mechanism. But that's a whole other podcast and conversation.
Yeah.
But what we know is if we develop skills and we're exposed to an ability to have agency and, you know, control over what's going on, then, you know, some upstream neural structures in the brain kick in and actually inhibit the downstream fear centers. So you actually do get a change to your physiological response.
And is that dose dependent as well? The more you do it, the greater sense of agency you have over it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but you've only got that window. We know it's only in teenagers, which is interesting.
Really?
It's not kids. It's in those teenage plastic years of the brain that if you really, I mean, it transcends. We still want to do that in adult form and continue. So our brains are always plastic, but the real critical window is in those teenage years where we learn. It's the peak of neural plasticity,
right,
and all those experiences. So how do we make this less psychobabble for the listener? Effectively, if you look back at some of your childhood experiences where you were faced with adversity and hard stuff, I had, horrible things may have happened to me. It's not about that horrible thing. It's did you then respond in a way where you could do something about it and learn to reinterpret, the fact that you had agency. Really, really important. When we solve for our kids, we take that opportunity away.
Yes, absolutely. Right? And you see this, I think, as well, the well-intended mistake either from the parent or from the coach that says, I know better because I've done this and I've experienced this. Therefore, I'm going to make the decision for you. And I find that baffling because it's like, what do we want our athletes to do? What do we want our children to do is they need to be able to make decisions in the moment. They need to be wonderfully decisive when it matters most. How are they going to do that in every other, like out of the water, so to say, is that we're making all the decisions for them.
Yeah. And moreover, when that emotional state is triggered, if I've learnt, this is a bad aversive thing and I can't cope, I don't have the resources, then that's when that just hijacks your ability to actually think clearly and make decisions. But yeah, I mean, Piaget got it right way back when, right? The moment you teach a kid something, you've deprived them of the opportunity to learn.
Yep. Yeah, so it's that ability, both parents and coaches, would you say, to create an environment of choice and agency? Is that what you're saying is the most important thing here?
Yeah. You must expose them to adversity, firstly.
Yeah.
You can't, the human brain, the parental brain wants to always keep our children free from harm and suffering. But in doing so, we're actually depriving them of the opportunity to develop the requisite skills. So, expose them to those challenges, but then, look for opportunities for them to develop skills of I've got some choice and control that I can enact here. And what we know is it's more about the developing brain laying down those neural pathways. That means that then when we transform into adult life and a new novel threat, adverse stimulus shows up, our same response kicks in where we're like, okay, this is a challenge that I can solve. How do I solve this challenge? Yeah.
And I have the sense of self to be able to solve that. I have a higher level of self-efficacy to actually solve that. And so how would you say, would you recommend for parents to balance it out? Because there is the safety component. I'm not just going to let them take the keys at 13 and drive down to Melbourne. They don't have the skills, the knowledge, the awareness and everything like that. Is how do we provide environments to increase their sense of choice and agency, yet keeping it safe in that environment?
Sport. That's why I'm so passionate about it. Sport is the greatest vehicle for learning about what life throws at you, but it's in a safe, controlled environment. But allow your kids to fully experience what sport can give you. And when I mean that, I mean rejection, deselection, getting, Jimmy got put in the third grade, the bloody coach didn't. Stop saving him. Let him learn that he's not as good as his mates. Or let him learn that there's injustice in the world and maybe he is as good as his mates, but the coach genuinely didn't judge him fairly. That's a pretty powerful thing to learn. And, it goes on and on. So rejection, setback, failure, learning that you've got to be, a good teammate and not and live up to certain expectations, whatever. I love sport for the vehicle it can be for giving kids that opportunity for, tasting what life throws at you. And then secondly, it can be a wonderful vehicle for nurturing the parent-child relationship.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we see too much of the inverse, right? It's, I don't want dad to come and watch me play anymore. I hate the car ride home because, all that stuff. And that's where, we've got to be really careful around the harm that can be done, well-intentioned mistakes, but the harm. Parents protecting kids too much and depriving them of learning their own journey, as well as the deterioration of the parent-child relationship through the usual overbearing, talking too much, coaching, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's it. What's your role?
Yeah, exactly.
What's your role as a parent?
Yep. But yeah, so to your question, sport, I can't see a reason why you wouldn't throw your kids in lots of sport to have that opportunity for actually exposure to the tough. We always think, oh, sport's great. They can get fit, get strong, learn to make friendships. Of course, that's great stuff. But I look at sport and think, what an awesome cocktail of hardship and setback and failure. And, when your kid misses that kick and they lose the game, he's allowed or she's allowed to feel that pain. Let them feel that pain.
And that's life.
Right.
To deprive them of that opportunity to have a sense of agency through the pain and the disappointment is not acknowledging the reality of life. And then participation. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that? Let's just give every kid a participation award because they did the thing.
Yeah, you'll have to get me in for another podcast when it comes to that that idea that we need to somehow rescue people from those things, right? I don't know about yourself, I've literally had clients who present with full diagnostic criteria for clinical depression when the context is they had their heart broken. Their girlfriend broke up with them that they were in love with. Sad. They should be sad. They should have a bit of adjustment. But full-blown clinical depression with nothing else in their context that was a vulnerability to that or a precursor to that.
Yep.
And then you look at the person's background and history, and not unsurprisingly, they've had a life where they have literally been rescued everywhere from anything adverse, hard, or, they were good at sports, so they had accolades, they were good looking, so they had lots of girlfriends, they, always were the popular kid because they had social affordances and charisma, whatever. They had never experienced a tough internal emotion.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's playing out through society at large. How many people, millennials in particular, have never had to actually experience heavy setback, and more so, they've been rescued from it. Yep. Either the parent will do it, the teacher will do it, the government will do it, whatnot, and there's obviously got to be protective measures in place. But to your point, we're taking away that sense of agency, that choice to actually lift yourself up through adversity, challenge.
Yeah.
Sport's a wonderful avenue to do that.
Well, there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
If you're not as fast as that girl, you literally can't make it up. You're not. If you drop the ball and the team loses, that's what happened. I like that it's much harder. And then, like I said, parents can always jump in and create a story. Oh, you were the best on ground, even though you didn't get the medal. You did all that bullshit. But fundamentally, I love the honesty of sport.
Yeah, and you're allowed to fail because that's what's going to happen in life, and you give it a go, and that's a great thing to be appreciative of. Yep. But let's not pull the wool over your eyes and go, hey, you can only feel a certain way and you're not allowed to fail and make mistakes and all that good stuff from sport. I'm very thankful I had lots of opportunities to do that at a decent level.
Yep.
I think that's a fantastic message. I'm very conscious of your time as well, mate. Anything that you want to mention in closing? I know you got a lot of things to do today. It's been an enjoyable podcast on many levels.
No, it's been a great chat. Hopefully it's of use and the listeners can take something that's meaningful to them from it.
Absolutely. Awesome, mate. Well, thank you so much for your time again. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your vast amount of wisdom. There's so many awesome little bits there. I'm actually keen to listen to it myself back and really appreciate your expertise and what you do in this space, mate.
Good on you for opening up the conversation.
Thanks, Jonah. Cheers. Cool.